There are two types of people in this world, and the difference between them has nothing to do with talent, education, connections, or luck. The first type wakes up every day and immediately begins the ritual of powerlessness. They check the news to see what is wrong with the world. They scroll through social media to see what everyone else is doing. They rehearse in their minds all the things they wish were different. They spend their morning, their afternoon, their evening focused on things that are completely outside their control. And then they go to sleep wondering why they feel so exhausted despite accomplishing nothing. The second type wakes up differently. They ask one question, what can I control today? And then they spend their entire day on the answer to that question. Same 24 hours, same world, same challenges, but completely different results, completely different lives, completely different futures. Which type are you? And more importantly, which type are you willing to become? There was an eagle once, born in captivity, raised among chickens in a farmer's yard. This magnificent bird, designed to soar at heights where the air is thin and the view is limitless, spent its days pecking at the ground, fighting over scraps of grain, living a life so far beneath its potential that it became normal. The eagle looked up sometimes, saw other eagles riding the thermal currents high above, and felt something stir within. But then it would look around at the chicken wire, at the limitations of the yard, at the farmer who controlled the feed, and it would return to pecking. It focused all its energy on things it could not change: the fence, the farmer's schedule, the size of the yard, why it was born there, why life was unfair. And in focusing on these things, it never discovered the one thing it could control. The powerful wings folded against its body one day. A storm came, the gate blew open, and in that moment of chaos, something awakened. The eagle stopped focusing on the fence and started focusing on its wings. It flew, not because the circumstances became perfect, but because it finally placed its attention on what it could actually control. You are that eagle right now, today, in this moment. And the question that will determine everything about your future is this: where is your focus? Every single human being wakes up with the same 24 hours, but we do not wake up with unlimited energy. You have a finite amount of mental, emotional, and physical energy each day. It is like a battery that drains with use. And here's what most people never realize: worrying drains that battery faster than working. Focusing on what you cannot control is like leaving every application open on your phone while wondering why the battery dies before noon. You are spending your life force on things that will never respond to your effort. Let me tell you about two men I knew, business partners who started a company together. When the economy crashed, when government policies changed, when their industry faced unprecedented challenges, these two men made different choices. The first partner spent his energy in long conversations about how the government was destroying businesses, how the economy was rigged, how the system was broken. He attended protests. He signed petitions. He spent hours each day reading news articles that confirmed his anger. He focused on policies he could not write, decisions he could not make, leaders he could not control. His energy went into the outer circle, the circle of concern, the circle of things that were real but untouchable. The second partner looked at the same situation and asked a different question. Not why is this happening, but what can I do something about? He could not control government policy, but he could control his product innovation. He could not control the economy, but he could control his customer service. He could not control market forces, but he could control his team's training and efficiency. He placed every ounce of his energy into the inner circle, the circle of influence, the circle of things he could actually touch and change. 5 years later, the first partner was still angry, still broke, still blaming. The second partner had built something remarkable, not because he had better circumstances, but because he had better focus. Same storm, different response. Same challenges, different energy allocation. The mathematics of success is simple. Energy placed on controllables multiplies. Energy placed on uncontrollables evaporates. Most people live their entire lives in the outer circle. They wake up and immediately check what they cannot control, the news, other people's opinions on social media, the weather, the traffic, the economy, what happened yesterday, what might happen tomorrow. They spend their breakfast worrying about things that will never respond to worry. They drive to work frustrated by traffic they cannot change. They arrive at their job complaining about management decisions they did not make. They return home exhausted, not from productive work, but from the mental gymnastics of focusing on the uncontrollable. And then they wonder why life feels so heavy, why progress is so slow, why peace is so elusive. Winners live differently. They live in the inner circle. They wake up and ask, what can I control today? My attitude, my effort, my learning, my response, my habits, my words, my work, my growth. They take the same 24 hours everyone else gets and they invest it where it can actually produce returns. There was a factory worker named Ahmed. The factory closed. Hundreds of people lost their jobs on the same day. Ahmed's initial reaction was like everyone else's: anger, fear, blame. He spent 2 weeks focused on what he could not control. Why did management make those decisions? Why did the economy fail? Why did this happen to him? Why was life unfair? Those 2 weeks produced nothing but bitterness. Then something shifted. Ahmed realized he was spending energy on the past, which cannot be changed, and on other people's decisions, which he never controlled. He made a list. On one side, everything he could not control about his situation. On the other side, everything he could. The first list was long and depressing. The second list was shorter but powerful. His skills, his time, his willingness to learn, his network, his attitude, his next application, his next conversation, his next skill. Ahmed stopped attending the daily gatherings where former workers complained. He started attending free training sessions at the library. He could not control who would hire him, but he could control how qualified he was when opportunity appeared. He could not control the job market, but he could control his LinkedIn profile, his resume, his interview skills. He could not control the economy, but he could control his expenses and his side projects. 18 months later, Ahmed was not just employed, he had started his own consulting business, helping other factories improve efficiency. The very skills he developed while unemployed became his greatest asset. His problem did not get smaller, he got bigger. And that is the principle. You shrink your problems by expanding your capabilities. And you expand your capabilities by focusing on what you can control. There was a young musician named Priya, extraordinarily talented, who spent 5 years waiting for the music industry to recognize her. She focused all her energy on getting the attention of producers, labels, and industry gatekeepers. She obsessed over why they did not call back, why they chose other artists, why the industry was unfair. Her focus on what she could not control, other people's decisions, industry politics, timing, luck, paralyzed her creativity. She stopped writing new music because she was too busy being bitter about the old music that was not getting heard. Then one day, exhausted from the mental prison she had built, Priya made a decision. She would focus only on her craft, not on who was listening, but on what she was creating, not on industry approval, but on artistic excellence. She started writing again, not for labels, but for herself. She started performing again, not in famous venues, but in small cafes where people actually listened. She focused on what she controlled: her practice hours, her songwriting, her performance quality, her connection with the audience in front of her. Within 2 years, something remarkable happened. The excellence she focused on created its own gravity. People started sharing her music. Small audiences became larger ones. And the industry gatekeepers she had been chasing suddenly started calling her, not because she focused on them, but because she stopped focusing on them and started focusing on mastery. The principle is ancient and unchanging. Mastery attracts opportunity. You do not chase success by focusing on success. You attract success by focusing on excellence in what you control. Your mind is either a prison or a launch pad, and the difference is focus. When you focus on what you cannot control, you build walls. When you focus on what you can control, you build wings. Let me be very clear with you about something that will change your life if you truly understand it. There are things you control, and there are things you do not control. And your ability to distinguish between these two categories will determine whether you live in freedom or frustration, whether you build something meaningful or waste your years chasing shadows. What do you actually control? Your response. That is the first and most powerful thing. You do not control what happens to you, but you control what happens in you. You do not control the situation, but you control your reaction to the situation. Someone insults you, you do not control their words, but you control whether those words become your prison or your motivation. The economy shifts, you do not control market forces, but you control whether you adapt or complain. Life disappoints you, you do not control the disappointment, but you control what you do next. You control your daily habits. Nobody forces you to wake up at a certain time. Nobody controls whether you read or scroll, whether you exercise or make excuses, whether you invest your evening in growth or waste it in distraction. Your habits are the compound interest of self-improvement, and they are completely within your control. You control your learning. In a world where information is everywhere, ignorance is a choice. You control whether you grow or stagnate, whether you develop new skills or keep repeating old patterns. You control what you put into your mind, what you study, what you practice, what you master. You control your associations. You choose who you spend time with, who influences you, who speaks into your life. You cannot control what your family thinks, but you control whether you adopt their thinking. You cannot control what negative people say, but you control whether you sit at their table. You control your attitude. This is the ultimate freedom that no circumstance can take from you. You control whether you see obstacles or opportunities, whether you focus on what is missing or what is possible, whether you approach life with gratitude or bitterness. Let me tell you about Carlos. He drove a taxi in a city where the economy was collapsing. Fuel prices were rising, competition was increasing, regulations were tightening. Every other driver Carlos knew spent their days complaining. They gathered at taxi stands and talked about how the government was destroying their business, how ride-sharing apps were unfair, how customers were cheap, how life was impossible. They focused on fuel prices they could not set, regulations they could not write, competition they could not eliminate, and an economy they could not fix. Carlos listened for a while, then made a different choice. He could not control fuel prices, but he could control his routes and reduce unnecessary driving. He could not control competition, but he could control his service quality. He could not control the economy, but he could control the experience he created for every passenger. While others complained about customers, Carlos learned their names, remembered their preferences, kept his car immaculate, offered bottled water, played pleasant music, and treated every ride like it mattered. On to Miramat. That man has no taste. Within a year, something remarkable happened. Carlos had a list of customers who would not ride with anyone else. They called him directly. They recommended him to friends. They tipped generously because he gave them something rare, excellence. While other drivers fought over random passengers at taxi stands, Carlos had a schedule full of people who specifically requested him. 3 years later, Carlos owned 5 vehicles and employed other drivers. He built a transportation company not because his circumstances were better, but because his focus was better. The principle is timeless. Excellence is always in demand, even in a terrible economy. But you cannot pursue excellence while your energy is consumed by things you cannot control. Now let me tell you what you cannot control. because this is where most people waste their lives. You cannot control other people's opinions. You can influence them, but you cannot control them. Someone will misunderstand you, criticize you, reject you, and you can spend your entire life trying to change their mind. Or you can accept that their opinion is their business and your excellence is yours. You cannot control the past. It is finished. Every minute you spend replaying it, regretting it, resenting it, is a minute stolen from the future you could be building. The past is a place of reference, not residence. You cannot control economic conditions. Markets rise and fall. Industries change. Technology disrupts. You can prepare for these things. You can adapt to them, but you cannot stop them. Complaining about the economy is like complaining about the weather. It changes nothing except your mood. You cannot control natural circumstances and timing. You do not control when opportunities appear, when doors open, when seasons change. You can position yourself, but you cannot force timing. You cannot control other people's success or failure. Their wins are not your losses. Their progress is not your setback. Focusing on their results is focusing on something completely outside your circle of influence. There were two farmers in a region that faced severe drought. Both had the same land, the same crops, the same problem. The first farmer spent his energy cursing the sky. He complained about the weather, blamed the government for not providing relief fast enough, resented neighboring regions that got rain. He focused entirely on what he could not control, the drought. His fields dried up, his crops failed, and when the rains finally came 2 years later, he had nothing prepared to receive them. He had spent all his resources and energy on anger. The second farmer accepted the drought on day one. He could not make it rain. So he stopped wasting energy wishing for rain. Instead, he focused on what he could control. He invested in water conservation techniques. He researched drought-resistant crops. He diversified his planting. He improved his soil quality. He built infrastructure to capture every drop when rain eventually came. When the drought finally ended, this farmer did not just survive, he thrived. His preparation met opportunity, and he had his best harvest ever, while his neighbor was still starting from zero. Same drought, same timing, different focus, different results. One man spent 2 years focused on what he could not control and ended with nothing. The other spent 2 years focused on what he could control and ended with abundance. You need to understand something that will set you free. Holding on to what you cannot control is like carrying rocks uphill. Every step becomes harder. Every day becomes heavier. You wake up tired because you went to sleep carrying burdens that were never yours to carry. The weight is not just mental, it becomes physical. Your body responds to misplaced focus with tension, with stress, with illness. You are not designed to carry the weight of things beyond your reach. There was a woman named Yuki, a mother of 3 adult children. She loved them deeply, and that love became a cage. She worried about their career choices, their relationships, their financial decisions, their life directions. When her son chose a career path she disagreed with, she spent months trying to change his mind. When her daughter dated someone Yuki did not approve of, she made her disapproval known repeatedly. When her youngest struggled financially, she lost sleep trying to control his spending habits. Yuki's entire life became about managing the lives of 3 adults who had their own paths to walk. The cost was enormous. Her relationship with her children became strained. They stopped calling as often. They stopped sharing as openly. They felt judged, controlled, suffocated. And Yuki herself developed health problems, high blood pressure, insomnia, anxiety. Her doctor told her the stress was killing her. But she could not let go. She believed that letting go meant not caring, that release meant abandonment. Then one day, after a particularly painful argument with her son, something broke open inside Yuki. She realized she had been trying to control things she never controlled in the first place. Her children's choices were theirs. Their mistakes were theirs to make. Their lessons were theirs to learn. She could offer wisdom, but she could not force outcomes. In trying to control their lives, she had lost connection with them and with herself. Yuki made a decision. She would love without controlling. She would care without caring. She would support without suffocating. She released her grip on their choices and reclaimed her grip on her own peace. The transformation was remarkable. Within months, her relationships with her children improved dramatically. They called more because the calls felt safe again. They shared more because they were not afraid of judgment, and Yuki's health improved. Her blood pressure normalized. She slept again. She rediscovered interests she had abandoned. The principle is profound. Love releases, fear controls. When you truly love someone, you give them the freedom to be who they are. When you operate from fear, you try to make them who you need them to be. Let me tell you about strategic ignorance. Not everything deserves your attention. Not every news story, not every opinion, not every crisis, not every trend. There is more information available today than any human can process, and most of it is about things you cannot control. The discipline of selective focus is the discipline of protecting your mental energy for what actually matters. There was a young entrepreneur named Jamal who started a business in a chaotic market. Every day brought news of competitors launching, investors backing other companies, market shifts, economic predictions, industry drama. Jamal could have spent his days consuming all of it, staying informed about every development, tracking every competitor's move. Many entrepreneurs do exactly that. They become experts on their competition and amateurs at their own craft. Jamal made a deliberate choice. He limited his information intake to 1 hour per week. He would check industry news once, note anything truly relevant, then return his focus to what he controlled: his product, his customers, his team, while other entrepreneurs panicked with every market fluctuation. Jamal built while they reacted to every competitor's announcement. He innovated. While they knew everything about the industry, he knew everything about his customers' needs. 3 years later, while many of his competitors had burned out from the stress of constant reaction, Jamal had built something solid. His company was not the loudest, but it was the most stable. His product was not the most hyped, but it was the most loved. The principle is simple. What you feed grows. What you starve dies. Feed your focus on controllables. Starve your attention to uncontrollables. When you let go of what you cannot control, something powerful happens. Energy becomes available. It is like unplugging devices that were draining your battery. Suddenly you have power for what matters. That mental energy you were spending on worry can now go toward work. That emotional energy you were spending on resentment can now go toward relationships. That physical energy you were spending on stress can now go toward strength. There was a teacher named Lynn who worked in a broken education system. The bureaucracy was inefficient. The policies were outdated. The resources were inadequate. The administration was difficult. Lynn could not change any of it. She was one teacher in a massive system. And the system did not ask for her opinion. She could spend her career bitter about what was wrong, or she could spend it building what was right within her reach. Lynn chose her classroom. She could not change the system, but she could change her room. She could not control district policies, but she could control her teaching methods. She could not fix the budget, but she could be creative with limited resources. She could not change administration, but she could inspire her students. Lynn poured everything into what she could touch. Her lesson plans, her relationships with students, her classroom environment, her teaching innovation. Her students flourished. Their test scores rose, their engagement increased, their love for learning grew. Parents noticed, other teachers noticed, administrators noticed. Within 5 years, Lynn was asked to train other teachers. Her methods were studied. Her approach was adopted. She eventually influenced the very system she could not control directly. But she did it by focusing on what she could control first. The principle is revolutionary. You change the world by changing your world. You influence the system by excelling within your sphere. When you master your focus, when you consistently place your energy on what you can control and release what you cannot, something extraordinary begins to happen. The compound effect takes over. Small daily choices, repeated over time, create results that seem miraculous to people who do not understand the principle. They see the harvest, but they did not see the planting. They see the breakthrough, but they did not see the daily discipline. They see the transformation, but they did not see the 1,000 small decisions to focus correctly. There was a young woman named Zara who lived in a region torn by conflict. War surrounded her. The economy was destroyed. Infrastructure crumbled. Opportunities disappeared. Safety was uncertain. Most people in her situation focused on what they could not control. The war, the politics, the international community's response, the injustice of their circumstances. They waited for peace to come so life could begin. They put their dreams on hold until conditions improved. They spent their energy on anger about the past and anxiety about the future. Zara made a different choice. She could not stop the war, but she could develop her mind. She could not control the politics, but she could control her skills. She could not fix the economy, but she could prepare for the economy that would eventually come while others waited. Zara learned. She found ways to access online education. She taught herself languages. English, French, Spanish. She learned digital skills, coding, graphic design, digital marketing. She used every hour of electricity, every moment of internet access, every opportunity to grow. The circumstances did not change quickly. The conflict continued for years. But Zara changed. She grew. She developed capabilities that transcended her geography. When she finally had the opportunity to work remotely for international companies, she was ready. Her skills allowed her to earn income that supported not just herself, but her entire family. She became a bridge between her war-torn region and the global economy. And then she did something even more powerful. She started teaching other young people in her community the same skills. She created opportunity where none existed. Zara could not control the war, but she controlled her response to the war. She could not change her circumstances, but she changed herself within those circumstances. And in changing herself, she eventually changed circumstances for dozens of others. The principle is eternal. Your response to circumstances defines your future more than the circumstances themselves. Your transformation never affects only you. It multiplies. It influences. It inspires. When you stop complaining and start creating, people notice. When you stop blaming and start building, you give others permission to do the same. Your life becomes a silent sermon, a living testimony that a different way is possible. There was a neighborhood in a declining city, the kind of place where hope goes to die. Crime was rising, properties were deteriorating, residents were leaving. Everyone focused on what they could not control. The city government's neglect, the economic decline, the crime rate, the property values dropping. They had meetings where they complained, they wrote letters that went unanswered. They waited for someone else to fix their neighborhood. One man named Omar made a different decision. He could not control the whole neighborhood, but he could control his property. He started small. He cleaned his yard. He painted his house. He planted a garden. He fixed his fence. He put up lights. His neighbors thought he was wasting his time. Why beautify one house in a dying neighborhood? But Omar was not focused on the neighborhood. He was focused on what he controlled. Then something unexpected happened. His next door neighbor, inspired by the transformation, started working on her property. Then another neighbor joined. Then another. What started as one man controlling what he could control became a movement. Within 5 years, the entire street was transformed. Houses were renovated. Gardens bloomed. Crime decreased because residents were present and invested. Property values increased. The neighborhood that was dying came back to life. Not because the government intervened, not because some program saved them, but because one man focused on what he could control. And that focus multiplied through others. The principle is powerful. Be the change you wish to see. Do not wait for someone else to do what you can do. Do not focus on changing everyone when you can start by changing your corner of the world.